Hey everyone, it's Harrison. Thank you for joining us for Season 2 of The Takeaway. Last season we explored some of the fundamental questions of human life. Who am I? What can I do? How can I understand the world around me? Well, this season's going to be a little different. If you were with us a few Sundays back, you would have heard Eric give his annual State of City Church sermon. And in it, he said that this past year has revealed many things about ourselves and our community. And he focused on 3 W's: word, worship, and witness. He told us how throughout the season of Lent, we're going to reimagine our life together as a church around those 3 W's. So in light of what's been revealed over the past year, the question is, how do we need to adjust to continue to be a vibrant community devoted to Christ and to one another? Over the next 4 weeks in our city groups, we're going to have these discussions, and they're going to be prompted by these short main course videos on the takeaway. So to kick us off this week, I want us to talk about habits. Throughout Lent, we're inviting you to commit to 3 centering habits, 3 practices that we think will help recenter us as a church community. Reading Scripture together, resting through worship on the Sabbath, and reconnecting with our City Church family. And here's what I want us to take away from this discussion. We need to commit to something better, not simply to something more. Here's what I mean by that. Whenever our spiritual life starts to feel a bit stale, we typically go into a kind of cycle. There's a period in which we freak out and we decide we've got to do something to liven things up. So we commit to all these new things. We start a new book, we join a new small group, we listen to a new podcast. Now, all these things are well and good, but what typically happens is that we become overwhelmed by all of that. We stop doing those things, and then we re-enter the stagnation. I think some of us have been through this cycle so many times that we've probably completely given up on the hope of spiritual revitalization. We feel like we're always going to be in the desert. And maybe some of us are so jaded and skeptical that anytime someone tries to push some new program on us, we recoil. I'm sure some of you might have felt that way with these centering habits. You thought, oh, here we go again. But here's where the takeaway comes in again. We're not asking you to do just another new thing. We're asking you to do a better thing. In other words, we all have habits surrounding what we read to find truth, the way in which we rest, and who we connect with. The purpose of these Lenten habits is to recenter what we already do around Christ and His church. And the good thing is there's nothing novel about these practices. They're riffs on what have historically been called the ordinary means of grace, the fundamental, basic ways in which God communes with us through Scripture, through prayer, through the sacraments, and through the fellowship of the saints. You know, we see this happening in the early days of the church. Acts 2:42-47 says this, "And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved." Word, worship, witness. They're all in this passage, and it's showing us that these 3 things are the building blocks of the early church and the building blocks of our church today. And you know, for the early church, these weren't new things. They were observant Jews. So they would have already had habits of reading the Torah, resting on the Sabbath, and living intimately with their community. Becoming Christian didn't mean they did away with those old habits, but rather they recentered their habits around Jesus. And that's what we're inviting you to do with us during Lent, to recenter the habits that we already have around Christ and His church. And in so doing, reimagining what it means for us to be a vibrant, Christ-following community. So until next week, stay well and do good.
Your amazing grace. sweet the sound, saved a wretch like me.